So what's up, everybody? I'm Ash. I'm the co-founder of Klezma. I'm joined here by Jon Romero and Matthew Adell, two friends and mentors of mine. And I'm really, really excited to present the Klezma Music Web3 cohort. So just a quick background about me. Like I said, I'm the co-founder of Klezma. Klezma is where we help artists identify, track, and automatically reward their biggest fans for supporting and sharing their music. So the more you engage and share and support an artist's music, the more access you get to your favorite artist. We do that with NFTs, and it's a pretty cool platform in general. I've been in crypto for 7 years. I've been promoting, researching, and building music for the past 15. And I thought this course would be really beneficial for anyone involved here because the music industry, to put it simply, is very complex. I think anyone here can agree on that. And then adding Web3 into the mix on top of that, right, just makes stuff really wild. It's like makes it even more complicated. And I could confidently say that after having two startups in the past 4 years. Previously, I co-founded Tezos Israel. So Tezos, probably a couple of you know, it's a blockchain similar to Ethereum with a lot less adoption. So I raised about $1 million to push adoption in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So bring startups and developers to build on the Tezos blockchain. And the idea was basically to build an innovation hub where we can bring, make it a multi-chain innovation hub and really build a really, really cool crypto accelerator. After a year and a half, I parted ways and I started building Klezma. So while I was kind of working on pushing adoption in Tezos, right, I saw firsthand how complicated crypto can be. In general, whether it's bringing very, very technical aspects to adoption, to the consumer, and just helping people understand basic crypto concepts. And so when looking at the music landscape, I thought it was really crucial to put together something in one place where everyone can kind of understand both worlds and bring people from both, the Web3 industry and I guess what you can call the traditional music industry, execs that have been, doing this for far longer than any of us, to give their 2 cents as well, and just bring one place that can be as helpful and valuable as possible. So over the course of today is just going to be basically the intro, and I'm going to go over like the high level concepts, what we're going to be covering, why we're covering it, and etc. And so that being said, right, the point of the cohort is to show musicians what is stable, scalable, what's feasible, and is, what strategies might actually work, where is Web3 going, tough to understand, and kind of combine both worlds in Web2, Web3. And the reason I say that, and as much as people might not like to admit it, Web2 is still here, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon for the next few years, and it's still the strongest distribution of music. And it's still an extremely, extremely essential tool when it comes to making it as a musician. And part of the biggest things we're going to be covering in this cohort is combining the worlds of both Web2 and Web3, and how they can, and in Web3 specifically, going through each tech stack, each part of the tech stack, and how they can benefit artists, what's actually usable, scalable, and where I personally see, or the speakers personally see, what tools can be beneficial. And finally, strategies that can help make you as a musician or even a creator very, very successful. So without further ado, let's jump into the overview of today, and let's get started. So we're in a bear market. The economy sucks. We just had a second bank in a row in the past 4 days shut down. It's not pretty, and the dollar is super inflated, right? So nothing's really looking too good. So the question is where does music fit all into this? And where does the music industry or the Web3 music industry fit all into this? And how can musicians, specifically in a bear market, put themselves in a position where in the next bull market be successful, versus how we might have been acting in the bull market previously in the NFT boom. And in the NFT boom, right, in 2020 or 2021, we really saw a wild, wild west, right? There were NFTs selling for 7 ETH, 10 ETH, and it was crazy. But personally, I knew it would crash. And the reason I knew it would crash is because I've been through the ICO boom, and I saw projects come and projects go, and I knew the same reason the projects that weren't successful back then, right? I knew that the projects NFTs I knew that NFTs wouldn't be successful for the same reason, and the reason is very, very simple, and that reason is because a lot of content is being pulled out and put out, right? But it really had just one kind of like a one-sided value. Like, meaning NFTs are really cool, but what's the real value you're getting out of this asset? And I don't even want to call it an asset, because then we could get into a whole direction and conversation and projections and all that other stuff. And let's forget about that, right? Like, what's the real value, right? Okay, there's a song attached to it, there's an art attached to it, awesome. But where does the actual understandable, down-to-earth value come to a fan? And I think that's the biggest shift that people are fighting or arguing, right? When they don't want to admit, like, why their NFT was selling for so much, and now it's not selling at all. Like, right now we're in a market where you can barely sell for 0.03 ETH, right? And the same NFTs that were selling for thousands of dollars are now selling for a few $100. And so, it's a big, big shift, and artists really have to understand, like, where we're going and why that reason is, right? So the question is like, what's the problem here, right? Why did we see this shift? What's going to happen? Why are people all of a sudden failing? And the problem is that these NFTs, in the beginning, like we said, they didn't really have any true value, right? It's really hard, and for people to, I think, to understand, like to accept this, and it's tough to say out loud sometimes, even for me, right? And people might be upset, but the fact of the matter is like, if anyone could give me a real true reason, like, put yourselves in a fan's shoes, right? Would you spend $1,000 and upwards on something that pretty much doesn't give you any access to your favorite artists whatsoever, other than just something you can possibly put on a screen and show to your friends? And I would probably assume, like, no, right? And if anyone, like, was going after them other than speculation, like, maybe I'm wrong, right? And maybe, people are really, okay with doing that, with spending that much money. But I truly believe that what is really going to make the difference between successful artists in Web 2 versus Web 3, or just in general, is your community, is your ability to build a true superfan community. And the reason is because no matter where you go, no matter what you do, no matter how you do it, they'll always be there to follow. And that bottles down at the end of the day to a true relationship, right? In Web 2, we had a zero opportunity, or a lot less opportunity, to build these relationships before NFTs really hit the boom, right? Because if you think about it, it's really, really hard to get noticed on platforms that A, we don't own, we don't really have a lot of control over, but B, also with 3.6 billion users across the creator economy on YouTube, TikTok, etc., right? And then there's the algorithm on Apple Music, on Spotify, and it's going to ruin you. It's really, really hard. And there's so much content out there, and there's so much people fighting for attention. Like, how are you as an artist going to differentiate yourself, and how are you going to reach those fans, right? And before NFTs, right, this is exactly where our beautiful friends, the record label, would come in. Like, they come in, and they basically say to you, hey, we have all the connections in the world, right? We have all the capital, right? And they're monopolies, just heads up. Like, that's what they are. And they're a one-stop shop place, and they're basically going to say, okay, we could take care of everything. You just make your amazing music, but we want 50 to 90% of everything that you make, right? And that was a struggle, and that was it's kind of still the oldest joke in the book. And then Web3 came into the play, and then, NFTs gave us the tools and the booming, right, where people essentially, or musicians, can essentially sell stuff, right? Let's call a spade, let's call it what it is. They were able to fundraise without giving away any sort of royalties or equity majority of the time, except for like certain platforms like Royal, whatever it might be, right? But they were able to raise funds for themselves, to support themselves, to keep making music and kind of support their career instead of having to go do like the average day-to-day job. And that got people a lot of attention, and that got a lot of hype. But now, past the hype, right, we have to like do things that are more scalable. And so Web3 tools that helped us like get this initial spark right now and going forward should be treated the same way that you would treat Web 2 tools. Now, what does that mean? That means you're going to have to grind. You're going to have to get entrepreneurial. You're going to have to hustle. You're going to have to get creative. And it's not going to be easy anymore, right? Like anything in life, there's no free lunches. We had a quick free lunch. It was great, right? They gave us a taste test. But now, throughout the course of, going forward and throughout this cohort, I really want to kind of focus on all of these Web3 tools and platforms that can really help support your journey as an artist and really show you the different ways that you can kind of build a sustainable, somewhat independent, if not fully independent, career off these tools. And so now, speaking of these tools, right now, what I'm going to say now is like the names of these tools right now, right? But this is obviously going to change. And I know this, and I'm sure of this because like we've seen ICOs turn into STOs, right? We've seen NFTs turn into digital collectibles. And and I'm sure we're going to see the same pattern of all these names until something just sticks. And until we really have full adoption. But right now, what these tools are called are NFTs, DAOs, social tokens, and the metaverse. And the beautiful thing is like all these things, especially specifically in Web3, they're all interoperable, meaning they can all be used with each other. And we can get onto that a lot later, and we'll speak about that more deeper in the cohort. But in the cohort, we're going to go over each of these tools in detail, show you guys how to successfully use them, how to incorporate them, and show you some of the platforms that are leading the way in innovation and in onboarding new musicians. And some of these partners we have today that are with us are leading the way are Decent, Bonfire, Roll, Polygon, and of course Klezma. And some of the people you see here are leading that revolution. They're going to walk us through some of the platforms that show you the best way and strategies that they've seen succeed. Now, another thing we're going to cover in the cohort is where Web 2 and Web 3 clash, right? And I think they clash on a few things. And this is interesting because, as a musician, you kind of want to understand and think about, okay, how do I combine these two worlds? In order to learn how to combine them, you kind of have to know where they don't see eye to eye. And then you have to find your own kind of niche in them, I think. And so one of the first ways that Web 2 and Web 3 clash is obviously on an ideological level. Web 3, and a lot of people in Web 3 is basically not a fan of how everything has been until now, which is basically, a very, very centralized, very, very monopolized way of tech. For an example, Facebook, right? You go on Facebook, they offer you this really great service. It's really, really cool. Your friends are there, but at the end of the day, they own you, they own your data, and they're going to make so much money off it, and you're not going to get a dime off it. And that's pretty wild. And they know more about you than you know about yourself. And that's pretty crazy. Whereas in Web3, I think, like in my opinion, it takes more of what I like to call a capitalistic libertarian approach, right? So which basically means that everyone should be making money, right? Everyone who works hard should be making money, and everyone who puts in some sort of effort should win. And any sort of centralized kind of, infrastructure, that organization, government, whatever it might mean, can basically we don't need you, go, fuck off. And I think in some ways it's a really, really beautiful way to look at things, but I think also not 100% convinced that there's going to be like this wild, wild west, right? Like we saw sometimes in the market in the past few years, where anything's going to fly. I still think there has to be someone that's always going to run the ship. And I still think, there's always going to be someone specifically in the music industry or the startup industry or even sometimes in the creator industry that's going to have to provide capital when needed or lend a hand. And, that equals, obviously more power in certain ways. But for sure, right, I think that, going forward, these things are going to change, but not the way that necessarily we think they are, or some people think they are. And again, to those musicians, even if Web3 is going to get harder, those musicians that are willing to put in the work will, and get in early, will see success. And another way that I think Web 2 and Web 3 clash is obviously on the legal side, right? And we see that over and over again. We had like an ICO for this project, that project, and all of a sudden the SEC comes knocking at the door, right? And they say, hey, like, this is not going to fly. And they shut them down, right? And we had a few projects in music as well, like royalties being sold and this and that. And next thing you know, boom, like knocking at the door, hey, you can't do this, you can't do that, and everyone has to adjust, and it's a big mess. And so, you know, whether or not, and I think it's really important to know, like, this can happen to any of us. And at any time, no matter, and so when you're out there creating and doing experiments and building and all those things that are really, really awesome, beautiful, you have to be careful and be safe and do things in a very, very safe way. You don't want anyone to ruin everything you work for so hard. And yeah, there is that saying like, hey, like, build it and then figure it out later. But in crypto, it's a little more dangerous because they're gunning for us in a way. And so just keep that in mind when you go ahead and you use any piece of this technology or you're using it in your career. Be aware of what you're doing. And which leads us to like the last thing I want to say, speaking of legal implications and stuff like that, right, is that, you know, no matter if it's Web 2, Web 3, Web 7, whatever it might be, all these basic business metrics, legalities, and etc., right, they still exist, right? Like, you're a startup at the end of the day. Really think of yourself as a startup. Like, your brand, you're not just a musician. You're a walking, breathing brand. And at the end of the day, in order for you to make it, in order for people who are working with you to make it, money needs to go in and money needs to go out. And that pertains to startups. That pertains to NFTs. That pertains to DAOs. That pertains to anything in the above. In that general category. And like I said, I think, like, me personally, I think there always has to be a man of the ship, like a captain of the ship, right? Specifically when it comes to music or just in general. And I think if you really peel back, like, the layers of a lot of these projects and protocols and etc., right? There's always, at the core, there's always a few people, no matter where it is, right, are 99% of them that are really running the show. Okay, that's just how it is. If you look at a DAO and the governance and etc., you'll see there are people that are running the DAO in the background, and there are people running this protocol or that blockchain in the back. There are people that make decisions. And so I think that's like a hint for us to kind of realize, like, okay, like, don't get lost in sauce. Like, you know, still we have to focus on building a real revenue, like a real business, and keep our heads, you know, in somewhat eye level kind of place in the market. And so, just generally speaking, in the core, we're going to try to balance these kind of two worlds of Web 2 and Web 3 and kind of see how they combine. And most importantly, like I said, like, we're going to do our best to make you the most successful you can be. So another thing we're going to be covering is where we still need Web 2 and where Web 3 doesn't work, right? And as much as we'd like to think we could sustain or possibly sustain this like fully Web 3 career, it's still really, really, really hard. And I think we're still in a stage where all these Web 2 platforms are still very much the biggest distribution funnel, right? Like Spotify, YouTube, whatever. Like, Web 3 is a really cool way to make money and to build a community and to engage and etc., right? But at the end of the day, like, you still need your music on Spotify. You still need it there. Like, you know, and just to give an example, if you're like, you know, let's like take Daniel Allen for an example, right? He's an artist that kind of made a big name in Web 3. He sold a bunch of NFTs. He recently had a big drop called Criteria, which I was really excited to see because he basically dropped an NFT collection that was spread across a bunch of platforms. And basically the idea of the drop is to show like all these cool things you could do and the potential that Web3 can bring. It's an idea that I thought of. I was waiting for someone to do, and finally someone did it. So kudos to Daniel Allen. Really well done. But, you know, and I'm not sure if Daniel Allen was on Spotify before, Apple Music before, but just for sake of example, imagine he had 1,000 collectors, right? All those 1,000 collectors got really excited about Daniel Allen. They're like, hey, this guy's going to make it, whatever it might be. And all of a sudden, right, and then they tell their friends. But their friends aren't Web3 native people. They don't have wallets. They don't know what that is. They don't care. So they go on Spotify and they start searching for Daniel Allen. If you're not there, Daniel Allen's not there. The guy just lost a shit ton of momentum. I don't know if he lost a shit ton of money, right? Because streaming, as we know, doesn't have the best economics for artists. But he lost momentum. And he had a chance to give himself exposure and make build an impact on these potential fans. right? And have them even the next wave talk about it, and the next wave talk about it, and the next wave talk about it, but he lost momentum because he wasn't on Spotify. He wasn't on these places. And so I think it's really, really important to remember that while we're still building Web3 and we're still doing all these things, Web2 is still the biggest distribution there. And, you know, when we're thinking about Web3 and the potential as builders, as entrepreneurs, right, specifically in the music space, I think it's also important to remember, like, just because, like, something that probably won't work is taking a business model or an idea that already exists in Web2 and putting in Web3, like taking a streaming service, copying and pasting Spotify, and just saying, hey, if you use my streaming service, I'll give you a bunch of tokens. Like, that's probably not going to work. Like, these companies are way too big. They're way too well off. They have way too much capital. And people are way too comfortable, like, on their platforms. Like, you're not going to, like, it's going to be really, really, really hard to grab someone who has, like, a family plan, who's paying $10 a month for unlimited music, who hasn't moved from there for the past 6 years, to all of a sudden switch because you have a few tokens to offer them. That's really, really, like, that's probably not going to happen. And, like, we've seen this with companies that have been trying to do this for the past 5 years. I personally know investors that have invested in these companies and some of these streaming platforms or other platforms that are trying to copy and paste this, like these Web2 platforms, but in Web3. And they're not happy because the business isn't doing well. And they're not hitting anything close to a good amount of, you know, daily active users. And so to wrap it up on that end, like, I'd really, really recommend every single artist to put their music on as many platforms as you can and get as much potential reach as you can. It's not necessarily about the money short term, but it's about, hey, where can people find me? The more I put my name out, the more I have a chance of getting noticed. And, you know, when that distribution kind of starts growing, and when you start distributing more and hopefully start getting more attention, right, the chances of you probably needing a bigger team, like a manager or whatever it is, to come and take care of the day-to-day business operations will probably be high, just like any single other company or brand or startup, whatever it might be, right? When money starts coming in more, you need to grow more, and there's more to do. And so that shouldn't be, you'll probably want more people to get involved if you get bigger as an artist. And Web3 shouldn't be something that you say to yourself, hey, like, okay, this is only for me, I'm going only independent, whatever it is, right? Because at the end of the day, you're only one person. You can't take care of everything. And I've personally seen this when I've worked with artists. Like, they have, like, when stuff gets a little too stressful or too intense, whatever it is, and they feel like they're getting distracted away from making music and making content, they just say, hey, talk to my manager. That's what they're there for, right? I need to focus all my creative juices, mind, whatever it is, on making really good music. That's how I'm going to keep my career going. And Web3 can easily incorporate, like, managers, record labels, and etc., right, due to smart contracts. We can easily have these splits on chain. And so the reason I mention this is because I don't want anyone to think for a second, or like by accident, like, oh, if I go Web3, I get no help, that's not the way, etc., 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 right? Like, thank God, like, we have technology that can make these splits in seconds, and it's okay. And I definitely see a future, right, where, again, artists are still going to want managers to take care of the day-to-day stuff. And they just want to be the president of the company and not the CEO or not hands-on. And they just and they're still going to need help. And I also see a future where record labels are going to start giving, like, they're going to have to adjust, right? I don't think a record label is going to go away like tomorrow or in a few years. Like, the small chance of that happening is very, very small. But I do see a world where now, okay, like, an independent artist is going to have a lot more tools, a lot more options on like, to make it. And that's really, really cool. Again, like, they're going to have to put in the effort, but it will be, you know, a little easier, and we're going to have a lot more tools available to them. And I see record labels, you know, when they're going to see that shift coming, they're going to go ahead and basically say, like, oh shit, now we have to change our deals around. And we've seen them slightly, you know, deals have changed over the past 10 years, 15 years, like, depending, you know, they're not as strict as they used to be, or not as tight as they used to be, depending who, what, where, how. But I think overall, like, the mindset is changing, and I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years a record label comes in and says, okay, like, this Web3 thing is going to be huge. So what I'll do for you, this really cool artist that I met and I think is really going to make it, right, or has a really good community behind them, I'm going to say, okay, I'll take, like, instead of like 50 to 90% of all of your royalties, I'm going to take 20% of all your royalties, but I want 40% of all your Web3 sales. And that's just like, that's the deal. And we've actually seen this in examples like Venice Music. Venice Music took a swing at that, and they're working on that right now because they really do believe that, you know, there's going to be some artists that Web3 can be really, really powerful for. And assuming their projections are right and etc., they can be very, very, very correct and do really, really well. And another thing we're going to cover in the cohort is every single day on each tech stack, on each part of the tech stack of Web3, I'm going to try my best to help you guys understand how different rights organizations and payouts and royalties come into play with the blockchain, right? And basically tracking any sort of rights, payments, etc., and how people, artists, and relevant parties, collection societies, etc., right, might look like in the future, where all these different royalties are going to start coming in, where all these different activations start coming in. So whether that be mechanical or whether that be public performance. So just a quick example, for those of you who don't know, mechanical royalties are when something is like, I would say, purposely, you know, triggered. So let's say somebody streams songs purposely on Spotify. And a public performance royalty is when that song is kind of played, performed out loud, I guess you could say. So example of that would be, you know, when a song is played on the radio. And I'm going to try to go through all these things and show you guys kind of where these royalties kind of come into play, where all these, like I said, all these different activations, and all these different scenarios. So, and speaking of scenarios, before I really close up, I really want to give a clear picture on kind of the order on where all, and how these tools, at least to me, kind of come into play today, and how you kind of should go about using these tools and using Web3 in a step-by-step basis. And right now, as the tech stack exists, I think, in my opinion, again, this is just my opinion, the way to go about it would be to go NFTs, right? DAOs, then social tokens, and then metaverse. And let me explain, right? So the way that kind of looks like is an artist will go out, they'll start their career, and they'll use NFTs to build their community, right? They'll go ahead and they'll be able to use data to see who's collecting, who's not collecting, et cetera, and bootstrap the community from there. A really cool tool to see who's collecting and what other kind of things your collectors are collecting as well on chain, right? For you to help you build kind of personas of your collectors and know who your audience is in crypto and Web3 is. A really cool tool like that would be Bello. So shout out to Adam and Ellie if you see this. I really like Bello. It's a really strong project, and they're really doing a great job. And then, you know, what NFTs you drop could vary for totally different things, right? You can go ahead and sell a little piece of the royalties with Royal. Again, be very careful with these types of things. Or you can go ahead and kind of sell and create an NFT out of your production kits using Arpeggi, or do kind of just a basic music NFT drop with sound. Or you can use Klezma to reward your fans for engaging with sharing and engaging with your music, and sharing and supporting your music. And from there, you can go from the data and you can go ahead and see who the community is and how much they were engaging with tools like Klezma. Then you can go ahead and say, okay, I have this community now. I'd love to make a DAO, right? I want to kind of make a strong community, put everyone in one circle, put everyone in one place. And you know, then you can go and take a look at how much people are engaged, and then basically give them more voting power in the DAO, more power in the DAO, right? And that DAO can be like, okay, voting power on, you know, what song should I drop next? Would you guys like this beat versus that beat? Where should I perform yet? Whatever it might be. Or it might be a DAO that's like, okay, I'm trying to fundraise. I'm trying to go the alternative route besides a label. So I'm raising X. I'm giving you guys Y. If you guys are in, great. Like basically, for lack of buzzword or lack of a better word, a decentralized record label, I guess you could say. And then, you know, you can go ahead and use social tokens to power the whole economy. But at the same time, if you don't want to use social tokens because it can be complicated in certain ways, you could basically say like, hey guys, I'm dropping this NFT. By owning the NFT, you're getting X percentage of my royalties. You have to pay X for it, right? And in return, this is your ROI, et cetera, blah, 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 blah. And then you could say, okay, from all these people that like all these different, from whoever owns my NFT, they get special access to my metaverse events, token gated experiences, streaming, experiences, whatever it might be. We can hang out in the metaverse, whatever it might be, right? But that's currently how I personally see the step-by-step, right? Like you want to walk before you want to crawl before you can walk, and walk before you can run. And I think that's just for me the way that makes the most sense, and kind of why we put the cohort in the day order that we did, right? So just to sum up, the step-by-step process is NFTs into DAOs, DAOs into social tokens, and that into Metaverse. The Metaverse can do a little bit of everything there, but generally that's kind of the process that I see this going in. And then the last thing to wrap up that I want to really cover is something that I personally think is very, very powerful in anything that you build, whether it's music, whether it's NFTs, whether it's a startup, whether you're a creator, whether you're whatever. And something that I try to think about every single time I make a move in music and Web3 and whatever, and that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm a big believer in human psychology. I try to always think about like, what happens if we do this? What are humans like needs? What are humans wants? And how do I give them what they need and give them the most value possible? And just to do a quick summary of what Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Maslow was this very famous American psychologist that basically put together a pyramid of what he thinks are the biggest needs, are the biggest subconscious needs of what humans, of humans. And it starts at the bottom. We have physical needs, which is basically air, water, food, shelter, etc., right? Basically survive. Then we have safety, right, which is personal needs, money, health, wealth, property, etc. Then we have love and belonging, right? We always want to feel a sense of connection with other people, with other humans. And then we have, right, the ego, the esteem, which is basically our ego, right? It's like our respect, our freedom, our strength, like our status. And then we have at the top, at the very, very top, self-actualization, right? Really understanding the potential we have and what we can be. And I think this can tie really well into crypto, into music in general, into building in music and Web3, because I'm always a believer there's a big difference between buying something that you think is cool and then buying something that you think is going to make it as an investment. And when I look at Web3 specifically in the long term, when you have all these people spending tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of dollars, right, on NFTs, I always kind of like get a little skeptical, right, on when I'm thinking of how we're going to push the technology long term. And when I always like, sometimes when people who are dropping 150K on NFTs turn around and say, oh, I'm just doing it to support artists, I call it complete bullshit. I don't believe it for a second. Like, say like 150K is not pocket change for many people. It's very, very few people in the world that could say like, oh, $150,000. It's like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like, so for me personally, like, I'm assuming that no matter what they say, they think the art's going to blow up and they're going to like make an extra buck off this in some sort of way. And I think there's a lot to say about investing in NFTs and art and behavior in general. But I think that artists and people that are running these projects, but specifically in music and for artists, like, it's really important to understand who's sitting in front of you and just accept this as a fact. That people, a lot of these people that are buying your NFTs are probably doing it because they think like they want to do a quick flip, right? And that's okay, that's fine. And in that case, Maslow's hierarchy of needs comes really, really strong into play. And let me explain what I mean. So if you are, I think there's two types. If you're able to target the pyramid in two different ways, I think you could be very, very successful as an artist. And those two ways are, understand there's two types of people that you can use to build a very, very big community. The first is those that put money in and they get emotionally invested. And the second is people that get emotionally invested and then and then can have money in. And let me explain what that means. So the first step, like I said, is first, if you can accept the fact that a lot of these people that might be buying or whatever are coming in to get the ROI, right? Say, great, okay, like I have the capital I need to get my project started, to get my career started, etc., whatever it might be, to do this DAO, this NFT drop, whatever. If you're able to kind of go there, right, and say, okay, well, now these people have their physical needs, they have their safety needs, right? They're able to provide for themselves, whatever it might be, but then able to kind of get them, help them feel a part of the community, right? So now, like, you've already made a large step forward, right? Because you have them, they put their money in, right? And then, and now you're also having them get emotionally connected to the project and to you, and that's really, really big. And that's how you kind of, I think you can really build a strong sense of community with the first type of people. The second type of people is the people that can't necessarily afford to drop tens of thousands of dollars on NFTs, but they really want in. And I think there's a really interesting concept there, because in Web3, the whole point of Web3 is more like inclusivity, right? And if we're just going to keep making projects where a lot of people can or people with just a lot of money can come in, invest, right, support you, whatever the word might be, and then get all this like say in your career, then what are we like we're just doing the same thing we did in Web 2, right? Which is like basically like the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and like nothing changes. And so, but if we're able to kind of, I personally believe that Web 3 brings a lot of opportunity for more people that don't have a large amount of capital, right, to get involved. And I think that the future of Web 3 is more about what you do rather than how much money you have. And what you do is actually worth something. And then in the regular world, we call that sweat equity. And so if you're able to, as an artist, right, leave some space for people to get involved that might not have the capital to buy all this money or to put, to get involved, but basically say, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, I'm happy to give you an NFT, right? If you're really, really into the community and helping us out, I'm happy to give you this NFT or this access to this DAO. And that could be just as simple as like, okay, get like 1,000 views on your TikTok, right? Like go on Klezma, you get 1,000 views on your TikTok video with my song in it, and we'll give you an NFT that will give you access to the DAO. And I think that by doing so, if you're able, you'll by default have someone who starts like kind of this in this orange section, right? So they feel that love and belonging to the community, right? Then you go ahead, you build up their self-esteem. And then in addition to that, right, if all the project goes well, you also help them kind of deal with the basics, right? Food, shelter, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that if you're able to bring in both those types of people using Maslow's hierarchy of needs into your community, into your superfan community, you'll have a higher chance of being successful as an artist in general. And I think that, you might say like, but short term, that doesn't bring me a lot of money, or that doesn't give me the support I need, the financial support I need, whatever that might be. And you're right, maybe you'll miss out on a few bucks, but in my opinion, right, you can never go wrong with having a strong community. Like never. That long term will always, always win, like all the time. And so building that deep, like having that it will just build a bigger and bigger moat. And so really focusing on that long-term strategy and that long-term involvement and having more people involved and being more skin in the game and emotionally attached to you and believing in you and your brand as a musician can really, really, really help you long-term. I think that's part of the ethos that what we're all trying to build here. And so now on that note, I think this pretty much covers everything I wanted to cover. And now I want to jump into the fireside chat with Jon and Matthew. I'm gonna put a link in the chat where anyone can ask questions. So go ahead and feel free to type in your questions there. I have the questions next to me, so whatever questions have the most voting or get the most voted on will have highest priority to get asked, if that makes sense. So without further ado, let me just make sure I have This voting thing in front of me. Great, I have it. Awesome. So, that being said, I want to officially intro Matthew and Jon. So both of them are mentors and friends of mine. They both have helped me greatly in my career. Really inspired me in a lot of ways. I'll give a quick intro to both of them. So Matthew, he's been in music exec for over 20 years. He built one of the first radio internet companies. I was working with companies like Microsoft, etc. Sold that. I went ahead and built and sold Metapop, and then went ahead and was part of the founding team at Beatport, and then went ahead and built sold Beatport, started as a COO, was brought in as a COO, and then was promoted to the CEO within 6 months. So has a lot of experience in building successful music tech companies. And yeah, that's Matthew, huge fan. And Jon is previously the head of marketing at Vector Management. I'm sorry. So he was working with talent like Kings of Leon, The Fray, Leonard Skinner, etc. Really some of my favorite bands personally. So that's pretty awesome. And yeah, so how this will work is I'll ask you guys a bunch of questions, take my questions from the crowd, and then and we'll go from there. So the first thing I want to kind of do is I just give you guys both an intro, but it really doesn't do you both justice. So I kind of want each of you to introduce yourselves, and then say how you got into the music industry, if that's okay. Matthew, why don't you go first?
Can you hear me? Just checking.
Yeah.
First time I've spoken. Great.
Yeah.
I got into the music industry in 8th grade. I started vacuuming a local record store. And they would pay me in 45s. I could get if anyone knows, that was a 7-inch record that played at 45 RPMs on your turntable.
Yeah.
So that was the early 80s.
Are you able to, I don't know, maybe it's the headphones or I think the audio is very faint. Maybe if you came closer to the computer, I don't know.
Can you hear me now?
I think it's a little better. Yeah.
Okay, then I'm going to go without the headset. So I've been in the music business as long as I can remember, since I was very young. And I eventually went to work for independent record labels. Jason, I see your comment about the audio. Is it better now out there, folks? I'll keep going, and hopefully it is. Eventually I went to work at independent record labels. I worked at a record label called Wax Trax Records, which predates sort of house music and EDM as being the first form of electronic dance music that really impacted clubs after disco happened. I was in Chicago when house music was invented, started a record label called Organico, put out really early house music releases, and eventually found my way to the internet. And I immediately loved the internet because and this is Web 1, right? But it was immediately obvious to me that the internet was going to disrupt distribution. And I think what a lot of people think of distribution as right now, it was totally different before. You used to have to manufacture stuff, put it in boxes, find someone to drive those boxes on a truck, and then literally put the things in bins in stores. And that meant that not every record was at every store. And the major labels had a huge advantage in that they could guarantee that your record would be available. Most people might buy a record. There was nothing worse than being in an independent band and getting to like Madison, Wisconsin and going to the record store and finding they don't have your record. Right. So the major labels had a really great advantage then that I could tell was going to be eroded because distribution was one of their specialties that were really difficult unless you had a lot of capital.
Okay.
Is the sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, in any case, been in the music business forever, currently at an AI company, and I'm here tonight to learn as much as I can, because I always learn from Ash. And while we hear from Jon, I'm going to put on a different set of headphones.
Good. Okay. Good. Hey guys, I'm as close as I can to the computer, so hopefully my head's not too big, but my voice is you guys can hear. Really, I guess, my quick background of me getting the industry is I was an intern at Vector, and I was, I've kind of spent my whole career really bringing artists into the digital fold. So starting as an intern at my first company, Vector, I was the one trying to bring people onto MySpace. So, I was the one talking to Leonard Skinner about, hey, how all these people are on MySpace. So when Web3 came around for me, it's the perfect fit. It's always really been about bringing artists and helping them translate what they do into these new mediums. Really helping them kind of, articulate their art in these different things, or their attitude or tone or any of that stuff. So it's kind of always been a really good pocket for me. So again, when Web3 came around, it's really something that, struck a chord, around all of the stuff that I had been doing at Vector, as head of marketing. So, that's creating community, that's e-commerce, that's monetization through fandom. And then that's, we were a record label for some of these artists. We were working with record labels. So really kind of all of the above, but again, really focusing in on the new mediums that are coming around as digital became, the de facto. And honestly, I think one of the reasons I kind of got out of social for me is because it was the normal. It was the day-to-day now, and I've always really loved to be on the bleeding edge. And so, Web3 really again spoke to me in those things. And Ash, as I was listening to the presentation, the thing that really stuck out in my mind that I love, one of my favorite facts, is one of the streaming companies told me this fact about their service, and I guess I won't say the actual streaming name, but it wasn't the big one. But they were saying that, and I think in the music industry, we forget this. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but I just love this story. That the fact that, most people that are listening to music are not fans. Literally their stat is 90% of all listens that are happening to your music are by casual listeners, not even fans. It's 0.8% that are these diehards. And that's 0.8. That's not even a 1%. That's 0.8% of these diehards.
Wow.
And these are the people that are going to be your NFT collectors. So we really have to understand that when we're talking about NFTs and the community that we're building, and really just the music industry in general. And again, one reason I'm so excited about Web3 is because it really gives us an opportunity to build a funnel to build that 0.8%. The next number is these fans. I'm looking at it. It's 9%. So not even 10% of people are fans. So 90% of people that are listening don't care. 10% might be fans, and then 10% are fans, and then the super fans are 0.8%, and they're driving 30% of those listens. 30%. So again, I think that's one thing that I just love to kind of say out there, especially when I'm talking to people in music, and then especially in this Web3 world, it's really about these diehard fans. So again, that's kind of always been my world, really working with the fan clubs, VIP, meet and greets, and really figuring out ways to build community, but then monetize that community for artists. So it's kind of really been my pocket for, well over a decade, and kind of now in my consulting and marketing world, really helping all their bands, technologies do that. That's kind of where I'm at now. So kind of answer that question.
Super cool. Okay. So Matthew, you've been in music since the beginning of the internet, right? So looking at what's going on in Web3 now, what are some similarities that you see? Like, besides for a lot of people creating albums in the music industry that don't exist. Like, what are the similarities you see over the past 25 years that are now popping up again?
Well, to some extent, it's always the same. The artists always have the same challenges, right? The good news is the capital necessary to record music has completely collapsed. So the barrier to entry to, making great music is effectively zero at this point. And it used to be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. But bands and musicians, they make music because we make music because we want people to hear it. And so the challenge of being a band or a singer or a performer or an artist or a producer who doesn't get heard, that frustration is always the same, has not changed. However, it's worse now because we've created it, because with the collapse of distribution gatekeepers, as I talked about earlier, there's now too much music, too many people who think they should be a musician. And they're flooding a world where, as John pointed out, very few people are actually conscious fans. Many, many people love music and they listen to it all day, but they don't necessarily think about who made it or have a relationship in their head with the people who created it. And as John pointed out, those are the people who are fans. There's one thing that's very, very different. When I was working in digital music, the very, very beginning, the music business was in the process of being decimated by file sharing. Decimated. The 70 cents of every dollar in the music business just disappeared over what felt like a couple of years. And so there was an advantage in the early days of being sort of a professional in the digital music business, which was that you were bringing much needed fresh revenue to the table. You were actually solving a problem, right? Which is people won't pay for your product. Let's build new ways of distributing your product, consuming your product so that people are willing to pay for it. And in the end, what people were willing to pay for, because they were already stealing the music, was context and convenience, right? That's playlists, and I can play it anytime I want on my mobile phone. That's the convenience. And so the challenge for any new entrant into the music space is that right now the music industry is in great shape. There's no problems in the music for the music business. The music business is doing great. It's growing in a way that it hadn't seen in years. Artists make more money of every dollar than they ever did before in the past. So it's a misnomer to get really hung up on the idea of how much of every dollar goes to the artist, because it is 5-10 times more than it was when they were selling CDs. The difference now in listening that has really damaged artists' abilities to make money is artists weren't in the business of selling music when I was growing up. They're in the business of selling physical goods, records, tapes, and CDs. In fact, once you bought a tape from my record store, we didn't care if you ever listened to it. You could throw it away for all I care. My business is done. I just got you to buy the Smash Mouth record, which, by the way, sucks. None of it sounds like the single you heard on the radio. And here's a $12 cassette. Goodbye. I don't care if you ever listen to it. We shifted to a model where people had to make music that people wanted to listen to, not just buy. Very, very different paradigm. And now you're just getting paid for what people are listening to. And that's been a real shock to artists about how the economics of that break apart. But it's actually a lot more equitable than it ever was before. And that's why I think it's fair to think of Web 1, 2, and 3 as this evolution and not moments in time that are in conflict with each other. The Web 2 world of today is infinitely better for artists than the traditional music business of my era of growing up. Infinitely better. There's no room to complain about the progress the music business has made for artists, for listeners, and entrepreneurs. But there is still much more to do, and that's what's exciting about, I think, the ideals of Web3.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really like what you said about that. That first they're making a lot more money than they used to, that the business, the music business is okay, right? But it's the artists that are still having the hard time. And, you know, a lot of times, like in media and et cetera, right, that you always have this kind of this story that's blown out of proportion. And I think, like, yes, okay, being an artist is very, very hard. It's very, very hard. Just like being an entrepreneur is very, very hard. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of perseverance. It's not easy. And yeah, you don't get paid a lot of money, especially in the beginning, but it's still better than it used to be. So, you know, just by the simple fact that everything's digital. And like you said, that people are listening, and whether they give a shit about you, they don't give a shit about you, you're getting paid, right? And that's big. So I'm going to switch that same kind of, you know, that same question to you, Jon. Like, what do you think about, like, looking at Web3, what Web3 is going on? Looking at what is going on in Web3, what are similarities that you see, like, issues wise, that we've seen in the past 20 years?
Issues, I don't necessarily have a comment specifically on issues. I mean, I see this moment as, you know, Web3 is another wrapper for us to wrap fandom around. You know, it's another, you know, thing that we can put fandom around, and artists have one of the best fandoms that are out there. Like, you know, as I was sitting in the seat, every technology wanted fans like an artist had fans, because it is, to your hierarchy of need, it gives the most connection and love. And again, so that fandom is just like no other. And so again, what I am so excited about Web3 is it gives us and I hate to say it, utility around fandom. It really does. And so in my mind, you know, it's not necessarily anything's different, because it's still a fan club, or it's still a meet and greet, or a this or a that. Like, it's still the same work that an artist has got to do, building one fan at a time, or they should be doing, building one fan at a time. Again, Web3 just gives us the building blocks to see who those fans are, to connect with them in a better way, and then actually have a symbiotic relationship even, which is, well, one, artists have never had to worry about the consumer as the fan as a consumer. They've never had to, you know, they've always had a box store to worry about. They're not selling directly to the fan. They're selling to Walmart or to iTunes or to them, and then iTunes was dealing with the fan. Now we are directly connected with those fans, for better or for worse. And, you know, I think that's a really interesting new notion that an artist has to understand in the Web3 world. So I think that's one thing that I see different, is that relationship now that an artist has to understand when they're stepping into Web3, that it's more of a symbiotic relationship that you're trying to build rather than just a push. Because, you know, we just know in Web3 that's just not going to work. It's a give and take. So I think that's one of the biggest things that, you know, I think that's to answer that question.
Makes sense. Okay, cool. So what are you guys, like, jumping into, you know, issues and continuing on the issues thing? What do you think, like, what are the issues that you think that Web3 and blockchain can really, really help with? Like, Jon, you just said, like, you know, we spoke about fandom in general, but I'm curious to know, like, Matthew, you've seen a lot of technological advancements. You've been on that side, right? Like, you've played with every single aspect and angle in a lot of different ways. So I'm curious to know, like, where do you think the blockchain actually solves pains in the music industry?
I'm a little more pessimistic here. You know, I don't see, or I guess I'll say it differently. I think I'm more optimistic than you are. I don't think these things have to be framed in terms of problems that require solutions. I think it's much more interesting to think of Web3 and blockchain and crypto as a set of a place rife with opportunity. And everywhere, there's more opportunity when there are fewer people in a pond. I mean, sure, everyone, right? It's easier to be a big fish in a small pond. And so the opportunity now is for artists to stake some claim in this arena. And, you know, I remember, this is going to show how old I am. I remember talking with friends and saying, one of these days, a musician's going to break on the internet. You know, because no one had been signed from the internet. No singles had broken on the internet. The internet was just this thing, and it was Justin Bieber, as I recall, at least in the United States, and who was the first to really, break through. And one reason was, he's Justin Bieber. Love him or hate him, he's obviously good at being Justin Bieber. And also that there weren't a lot of musicians working hard at having hits on YouTube. And so the opportunity right now for every artist is to go kick ass in this new arena with fewer fish in the pond and stake a claim. And then you get to this opportunity to go with exponential growth as the whole marketplace grows. It's just like there were people who won by being early on SoundCloud, and and the same is going to be true here. So I don't think it's that it solves issues or problems, but I think right now it is a more open field or fresh powder or whatever metaphor you want to use, a clearer path. And I think it'll be really exciting when we cannot, and it'll be soon. And I would imagine to you guys and a bunch of people in the audience today, maybe it's already happened and I'm just out of the loop, but who are the first musicians that break in this arena? And that person will be remembered forever in the next 25 people behind them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really like what you said. It makes a lot of sense. We're using this we should look at crypto as tools to help us get even bigger and better. And I think that's a big part of what we're trying to cover in the cohort. I think that's a lot of misconception. It's like in the area today, people are convinced that you have to have one and not the other, and it's not true. Both of them have to come together. It's an addition. Think of it as it's the cherry on top. That's how I look at it, at least. So, now I'm going to throw another question at you guys. Okay, as being in the weeds, both of you have been so many years, right, in the music industry, with so much big talent and so many artists and execs and working with so many different types of people. What are some things that people in the industry are very, very excited with this new technology in general? Where are you seeing people get up and extend more?
Well, everybody thinks that there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I think that's what's exciting them. Is that legitimate? I think that's a whole nother question. I think that, one of my former clients, the Kings of Leon, doing what they did kind of puts a, kind of not a false picture, but a different picture that's not necessarily the way to be out there. So I think a lot of people in the industry are that. But at the same time, I'll be honest, the mainstream industry is scared of NFTs. It's, because they're more mainstream. They're on the news hearing about the things collapsing and rug pulls this and that. And so the industry, we, and fandom and the general public of fandom is not there. And we can't negate that fact. I had an artist. I thought this was the best marketing strategy to tiptoe an artist into Web3. We got paid to play a private party for an NFT collection, and she was a woman. It was a woman-led project. It was synergy. I thought it was great. We tweeted out about that project, and the only thing that she got was hate. Everybody was, say it ain't so, you're not doing it. So, I just think that we have to understand that a lot of fans in the general pop are not into this world yet. So it's not just about launching an NFT and trying to sell it. It's about bringing these people along in better ways. So, for instance, one thing that I'm excited about, or think the opportunity is, artists don't know who their fans are that are at the concert. Ticketmaster already has this technology out. They're giving an NFT to every person who buys a ticket, and you redeem it. And then now you actually have a wallet address for everybody who's been to your concert. That kind of technology and data, it has not been around for artists to have at their fingertips. And those kind of opportunities are there, But but a fan isn't going to just jump into this pool for fun. We have to bring them there in these kind of Ticketmaster ways, or, you know, with really free NFTs, you know, for a lot of the artists. Now, if you're a developing artist, I think there's different strategies, but I think for established artists, it shouldn't just be a let's go for a sale. It's getting these collectors out there in a bunch of different ways. So again, I was trying to convince one of the clients to do a Ticketmaster drop, and the manager, first thing they said, so how much are we going to sell it for? We're not going to sell this NFT for anything. We're going to give it away. And they just didn't understand, because the only thing they heard was the $69 million Beeple drop or Beeple sale that happened. And so they just think that. So I think there's a lot of education that we have to give the industry, and that kind of thing. But then so I think that's one thing that we need to kind of be cognizant of, as we're all early adopters. We're all in, as we go into this world. Now, not every fan is there with us.
For sure. I really like what you said. I agree. I think that too many people are focusing on trying to do a cash grab, and we're going to speak about that over the next 5 years. They're just like, oh, this is an NFT, we'll make a quick bag, and then we'll drop off. And not enough artists are really focused on the long term, right? Like, hey, like, this is a way for me to help my fans feel more, engaged with me, closer with me, build a relationship with them, understand what it is, what's going on the next level of technology, to build that persona, to understand my fans at a whole other level, besides for like the charts that all these big platforms are showing me. So I completely agree. And it's always a struggle when you're going and trying to like close a deal, right? And you're like, hey, this is how it's going to work. They're like, what do you mean? Like, why am I? It's like every deal is like a new adventure. But in the music industry, it's wild. So that being said, how do you think the record label, this question goes to both of you, right? So how do you think record labels and the artist journey will change from these tools and startups being built using Web3, right? So we spoke about how, now they're looking more on the superfan side, looking at wallet addresses, etc., but it's still difficult, right? So where do you think kind of we can make these big changes, or we can at least start making the big changes when we're speaking to artists and getting them onboarded and etc. Besides for giving away free NFTs and stuff like that, what are some next moves that you see can be big coming forward?
Yeah, I mean, an artist. Well, labels are fine, they're going to adopt in this Web3 world just like everybody else is. So they're gonna jump into this thing, but I do think it changes it will, and it's not every relationship, but it will change some relationships, because an artist can raise money themselves now, and substantial amounts of money if without a label. So, but do I think that all artists are just going to, negate a label? No, they're just going to be different deals now, because you still need professionals that know and talk with streaming. You still need professionals that know and, know how to do a lot of the stuff in the music industry that you need professionals to do. So I don't necessarily think labels are going away, because we need these people's strategic skills, strategic marketing. But if an artist is coming to the table and they have the cash to do it themselves, then we're going to have different deals here. It's not just about, well, we're the bank and we're paying, and so we're going to get that, 69% of everything, people are going to be able to come to the table and make different deals, and they're going to have proof that they can kind of back that up. So I think that's one big thing that we'll see, because again, I think that even these Web3 artists, they could use real labels to get them distribution and marketing, because that's what brings these new fans in.
John, I completely agree, and I like something John said earlier, and I think John has been sort of centering on the super fan, and you've got super fans, people who just love you, and then you've got your whales, your big spenders, right? And your big spender is a subset of your super fans. However, your super fans who don't have $150,000 lying around, by the very nature of life, they're going to hate that asshole who bought a piece of merch for $150,000. And let's be honest, NFT today is just merch. That's all it is. It's incredibly expensive, incredibly complicated merch. It's not the music. You can attach music to it, but I can send you a CD with a t-shirt too. And so I think if we rationally think of NFTs as a really important vehicle for access to community, vehicle for access to physical meet space like VIP meet and greets that John talked about, and as a piece of collectible merch, there's a huge opportunity here. We don't need to conflate it with NFTs are going to change the way people listen to music. NFTs can be this massive, incredibly exciting opportunity for artists to reach new fans, to create new careers and new opportunities without it being this big replacement for existing behavior, because existing behavior is not going to change. The average person, all they care about is they want to listen to music. And even if you're a fan, all you care about is you want to listen to your music by your favorite artist. You don't give a shit what database that's on. The technology does not matter to you. It could be a gelatinous bowl of goo that someone brings to you and you sip from, as long as you get to listen to your favorite bands. But that doesn't negate the huge opportunity here that I think has been misidentified over the last few years. And I think if we can all really hone in on the real opportunity here, it's huge, and it doesn't have to be any bigger than huge.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of look at NFTs like I was talking. I think both of you guys. I mean, Matt, you know Alex, right? Alex, Alex is another mentor of mine. He was ex-head of global music at Apple, Amazon, big music guy like Matthew and John as well. And Matt, every time I talk to Alex on Zoom, he's always sitting in this part of his house, and it's like his office. But really, what it is, it's a vinyl library. And the guy's got like shelves and shelves and shelves of vinyls. And that's like a real hardcore music guy. That's like a Matthew and John. I'm sure you have something similar, right? And the way I see NFTs is like, just to go on your thought on how it's merch, like merch is not just only like t-shirts, right? It's not only t-shirts. It's CDs, it's tapes, it's vinyls, and etc. And I see NFTs as being the first kind of digital vinyl, that people are collecting and that you can eat, that you'll be able to play. I do think they'll have some sort of, especially music NFTs, I do think they're going to have some sort of impact when it comes to playing with music, right? Because just like you take out a vinyl, you put a record label, you'll be able to like go on your computer or go on your big screen in your living room and play the NFTs that you own, which again, right now are super overpriced. We spoke about that, right? For sure. But later on, like they're another way to engage with fans, both on a data perspective, right? Because when you sell vinyl, right, you're just like, you don't know who bought that vinyl. Like it could be in the fucking middle of Walmart. I don't even know where. You'll never know who bought it. You'll never know anything about them. And now you get to know exactly who bought it and everything you know about them if you have the wallet address, which is so powerful. And they'll go ahead. You can even see how many times maybe they've streamed it, they played it, and all this stuff is being built. And all these kind of aggregators are being built, which I think are super cool. And I think it's a really, really, that's why I see the music of the future of connecting the song to an NFT, right? It's going to be this collectible. And eventually when the artist gets big, right, if it also represents access, that's really where stuff's going to get very interesting. But it's going to be, in my opinion, it started off when it comes to the music and the song attachment is like that digital vinyl. So now that we're talking about the other way, we just touched upon a little bit about like kind of buying and selling and merch and et cetera, right? My question is do you think there's a future where collection organizations like PROs and et cetera, right, are using Ethereum or any type of blockchain to track royalty payments? Because technically speaking right now, we have the infrastructure to do that, right? We have something called Chainlink. Chainlink is basically something like, is a technology that can bring data from off-chain, right, onto the blockchain, and which I think is pretty cool in a lot of ways, and I think it could be definitely used when it comes to tracking music and tracking all sorts of things. But again, very, very big, very futuristic, very, very like big vision. But do you think there's an overall like future where collection agencies are using blockchain to track royalty payments in general?
No. Sorry, I do not think we're anywhere near that ever happening. But I do see real opportunities for transparency and data in the Web3 world. I think what's going to happen first is you're going to have services aggregating publicly available data into a good Web3 package that benefits the community. And then you're going to see big players publishing, retroactive data. The same way someone might put a white paper or retroactive data on a website. But there's a fundamental flaw in the idea of decentralization and that kind of data. There are too many bad actors in the world, much less the music business. I don't believe in some alternate universe where we can live in a decentralized world where people will all treat each other within the bounds of the law, good taste, and not steal from each other. That world does not exist. I don't see why it would exist anywhere in a digital realm. So I do think there's a place for transparency, and I think there's a place for published data that people can build great products and services on top of. The value there is enormous, but there's no current problem with the way that stuff is tracked. And if you could argue that they don't do a good job and too much of it's a black box, but that doesn't change by putting the data here. Just by putting the data here doesn't mean we all know whether every nightclub in Berlin is reporting properly every song they played, until you're somehow have some magic blockchain that lives inside Berghain and listens to all the music, in real time, which I suppose could exist. But you'd have to do that globally for it to mean anything. So I think there are huge opportunities there, but not there. I think similarly, people have been really tied up in the idea of metadata on the blockchain, I think is another losing proposition, because we already see people creating metadata disinformation on the blockchain. Since the blockchain, no one can take anything down, the actual core data of the blockchain about the music business right now is largely disinformation and permanently broken unless someone can re-centralize that and start removing the disinformation from the chain.
Yeah, I think the royalty side is just a can of worms that the Web3 world is not ready to really open yet. And so I just, I don't see them getting there anytime soon, for the black box reason. They don't want to open the black box. They don't want transparency, but also let's be honest, the blockchain brings a lot of real, licensing and royalty problems to the space, which aren't going to be fixed. Who's going to pay for a song to be streamed on who's going to pay the PRO, BMI when that song is streamed on Ethereum? Nobody's going to raise their hand to pay for that. So there's just some fundamental problems that we're gonna, that's really the Web 2 versus Web 3 that we're going to see. We could talk until we're blue in the face about what we think that's going to be. I think with where we're going with this, with developing artists, they need to just kind of put that aside and kind of go forward, without necessarily ruling about royalties. But also to your point, it's a lot of these things we're just not going to see that stuff yet. The black box is too big, and a lot of these entities don't want to open those things up. So, I just think it's a hard question and probably too big for us to even solve today.
Yeah, I agree. It's always interesting to think about, that brings me to my next question, which is what is your take on building streaming services on the blockchain, right? But when you think about all these organizations what they're trying to build on the blockchain, and then they have to do royalty payouts and et cetera, how would that look like? Because the way Spotify basically works, right, is there's money going in, right? People pay monthly, $10 a month, $20 a month, whatever it is. They pay monthly for the streaming service. And then, that's how they build a business. And then they have their costs, right? And part of their cost is okay, this person streamed X amount of times. Their music got streamed X amount of times. So they have to get paid out X based on the agreement we have the record label. And I'm sure on the other side, no way in hell, right? They're not getting paid from other ways, which is putting the music on there. That's just, they have different ways of income. There's different ways of and etc. And I think that could potentially be applied to Web3. But again, we'd have to see more of a SaaS business model for that to happen. And the Web3 company that's running that would have to think of a lot of interesting and creative ways for that to kind of work well. And it would just be a little bit of it would be hectic, but it'd be interesting to see though. And but again, like, not sure how it's going to be played out. But what's your take? What's your guys' take on having a streaming service, a new DSP that uses Web3?
I think you have to ask yourself, why do we need another streaming service? It stems from there.
Yeah. What do you think? Yeah.
Users don't care. So Jason is commenting that Audius exists. It's not meaningful in the grand scheme of how much music people listen to digitally in the world. It's also mispaying a ton of the wrong people. I could go on there right now and upload content that is not mine, claim it's mine. It gets minted to the chain, claiming I own something I don't own. It's actually a fundamentally anti-musician system. And not Audius, they built something that they believe will help artists. There are a ton of good people involved. But at the end of the day, a decentralized system means that bad actors will beat the shit out of good acting musicians all day long, everywhere. That's how human beings work. And so unless you have some control over the system, the free-for-all is actually terrible for musicians. And it's great for scammers. That said, I think someone should be building a platform for listening to music in the Web3 world that's not trying to replicate what Spotify or Apple or these other things are. And instead do something. That's what's fundamentally broken about this line of thinking, is because instead you could do something actually unique. That benefited, all the constituencies we're trying to address. So I think there are opportunities there, but I don't think copying what's already successful on Web 2 is the way.
John, you have any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I love the repeated question that I saw so many times on Twitter of, do I put my music on Audius or Spotify? Which one? And it's just a blatant answer to me. It's like, you absolutely have to have your music on Spotify. That's where the people are. That's where distribution is. So, do I think an Audius is going to come up and blow out the water? No, because most people don't care what chain it is, or Web3 versus Web whatever. Like, they just don't care. Most people don't care. So I think Audiuses and all of these are going to have not even an uphill battle. They're going to have just a blockade because of user adoption just not there. So, I mean, again, I love the utopia of where we could go, but I just think that's more of a great, like a utopia and just not something we're going to get to anytime soon.
Yeah, I think that like, for speaking about Audius, I said this. I saw the project come out in 2017, and I literally thought to myself, like, what? Like, how is this going to fly? Like, how are you going to make these big moves? Now we have cooler projects. Like, I think, we talk about Spinamp and stuff like that. There's these, like I said, aggregators that are, like, able to kind of put all the music NFTs out there, and you can listen to them. And again, that's like a digital version of a vinyl. But yeah, I agree. It's the trick definitely is to figure out a new way to experience music, what that looks like in the future. Like, and the adoption that it takes. It's tough, just like everything else. Like, they're all building here. I could say that as someone building music. It's fucking hard. It's really hard. It's not just like, okay, I have this vision, this is going to work, right? It's like, okay, like, let's get down to nitty gritty. Who the hell cares, and why should they care, and who cares? You know what I'm saying? It's tough. So I want to move on to the next question. We have a couple left because I want to respect your guys' time. How do we make music bigger and more profitable for all the people included, right? Like builders, entrepreneurs, musicians, everyone. How do we do that right? And the reason I asked that also is because I haven't seen too many companies that have had an exit out of music that have made a shit ton of money, right? Like, we're not talking like $100 million or 50, 60, whatever it is. I'm talking like a lot of money, like more, like double, triple the amount of time. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm just overall curious to see how do we make the market more profitable for everyone building involved.
I mean, how do we make it more profitable? I mean, again, I think that Web3 is bringing different ways to monetize, so that's great. You know, I think Web3 is bringing, you know, transparency, so that's great. And then so as that, you know, it's going to build that pie. You know, like, where, can you ask the question a little bit different way again? I mean, it's like where, you know, again, it's kind of like, where are we going with Web3? It's like, it's what we need to be doing, what artists need to be doing is collecting these fans. And I think that's where, again, where I see the opportunity in Web3. It's not necessarily putting your music on it or it goes this way or that. Like, what we're doing is collecting fandom. And that's what I just really, again, kind of just want to keep circling back to, because I think that's the opportunity for most people listening is, how do I find another fan? How do I make a couple extra bucks off of them and make them feel good about this? So I think what we're able to do here is bring a lot more capital to some of these more developing artists that wouldn't get capital like that at these early stages. Now, we've seen what happens with startups that get too much capital early stages. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a star, but again, you know, for somebody that just wants to make violin music, like, you know, or guitar music or whatever, it gives people an opportunity just to find 100 fans that love that and be able to make a living off of that. You know, we're really not talking about, you know, and in Web3, that's really possible. So I think that'll be my answer.
I think we'll see a continuation of the same trends that started with the advent of digital music. A compression in the middle, fewer middle people taking money in incremental steps in between the consumer and the artist. That's what I think we will see. Well, I'm speaking really to a music industry trend because, frankly, Web3 has not yet proven to me that it can effectively create a better margin for the talent than Web2 today. I don't think that's been proven. But it can certainly, against the super fans and even just big fans, create a much better revenue stream from those big spenders. And almost any artist can have a couple of big spenders. You know, that's the beauty, I think, of this opportunity is you can find those 10 people who are going to love what you do probably more easily than you can have a hit record at this point. So that's where this is certainly headed. Distribution time will be compressed, but another challenge that's about to face the whole music business, and it's related to this, and again, I think Web3 should be looking for real problems to solve as opposed to imagining problems to solve, is AI is about to flood the music market. And I've seen this flood before. When I owned a record label, a house label in Chicago in the early 90s, it was a busy week if the local DJ record store had more than 100 new house records a week. When I was at Beatport, I got to a place where it was about 30,000 tracks a week. You know, when I was still there, I'm sure it's much higher now. The major services are seeing about 100,000 songs a day right now into their system. And my understanding is that already 1% of all the music on Spotify is AI generated. And that is going to, it is going to be 50%. If nothing changes, it's going to be 50% AI generated music in 2 years and 99% AI generated music in 10 years. In fact, the market will be overwhelmed by AI generated content. And this is an important opportunity for artists and everything we've been saying, because people may listen to AI generated music, but they're not going to have a relationship with it. They're not going to fall in love with it. They're not going to want to know it. They're not going to follow it. It's not going to be an emotional attachment. And so there's this great opportunity for artists to differentiate themselves from AI generated content in this world, because the whole industry is about to be massively transformed. The same way digital allowed just everyone to finish a song and put it up. And now, basically my browser is going to be generating 10 songs while I'm on a Zoom meeting next year.
That's pretty wild. I have to say. Going back to the original question, we love technology. All right. Going back to the original question, which was basically like, okay, how do we make the music industry more bigger and more profitable for everyone? Right? I think the way that I see it going is with more technology that's coming out, obviously brings in more opportunity. Like Matthew, you said in the beginning, like, okay, like in the beginning, like when you had your record label in Chicago, you were driving around, you were doing the things that don't scale, right? Driving around, dropping it off, like all these things. And then the digital came in, right? Digital streaming. And now people are making 5x more the amount of money, but with more money comes more problems, right? Because there's a lot more people on the internet. You get blocked out. Like, how do you make noise? How do you get attention? It's harder in some ways, but there's more opportunity in other ways. And I think that with Web3 or AI, but I'll stick to Web3 because that's really the topic of this whole entire cohort. No big deal though. Is that, the more technology that we have, the more opportunity. It's just very simple. So the more like let's say the metaverse takes off, the more opportunities you have there to make money there. As in like digital concerts, like engage in activations there. Same thing with the NFTs. Yeah, like eventually we're not going to sell them for $7,000-$10,000 a pop, right? It's $69 million in people, right? And art, and I think in general, it's just a completely different topic when it comes to music. It's just something else. I don't understand it, but that's besides the point. I think that, more and more, the more tools that come out, simply put, the more opportunities there will be. And the more that you can grab a hold of those opportunities, the more you'll be able to succeed. And, Matthew, like, when you were talking about how AI is going to come in, and you think your call, and I believe your call, because you've been good at your calls. History says that, right? You've been good at your calls, like that. You think in 5 years, 50% or 10 years, whatever or 50% of all music out there is going to be AI generated, and then eventually it's going to get to 99. At first, I'm not going to lie, I shit my pants a little bit. I did. I was like, holy shit, that's crazy, right? That's wild. But like creativity and this and what about that? And there's definitely a lot of ways that AI are going to come in, and it's going to disrupt a lot of industries. Like I think developers, gone, forget it. Like I think marketers are the very few things that are going to be able to stay. Very few things. Like creatives. That's my personal gut feeling. Yeah, we're okay. But then I thought about it for a second. I was like, okay, well, if 99% of the music out there is going to be AI generated, then that actually gives you a really, really cool opportunity to show that you're legit, show that you're real. And that's where the NFTs can really be strong. Because then if everyone understands that 99% of the music out there is horseshit, it's fake, right? Then, and you're the 1% that's making that big of an effort, how much more will people appreciate you? And how much more will they want to get involved with you? You know what I mean? I think that's a really, really big thing. And there's an opportunity there within itself. I'm very, very bullish. I don't know if you guys can tell, on super fan communities, like just like you, John, super bullish on that. But anyways, that pretty much wraps up all the questions I had. And yeah, on that note, I think that wraps up our day. So thank you guys so much for joining. Really, really great pleasure. I'm going to stop the recording now. And anyone in the audience, feel free to DM me with any questions. And thanks for joining us for the first day of the cohort. Looking forward to the rest of the week.
Thank you, Asher. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Be safe out there.
Cheers.